inside the 10. Hart tips it in and it's Ward. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offense taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's edition of the Waterboy Experience. I am your host, El Muchacho de Aqua himself, Davis McLemore, and we're coming at you with fresh hot sport news, a preview of week 1 of the NFL, as well as a way too early predictions. Will our bias play a role? Is Patrick Mahomes' wife mentally insane? Here's a better one. Will Jackson Mahomes and the dancing Juju Smith make a TikTok together this season? All that, and all that doesn't mean shit. Plus a review of the Formula One race in Montreal. Man, I'm going to have a long day. But enough about me. Let's get someone else to talk about me. Please welcome the CEO and CFO of Nye Productions, the Red Bull chugging son of a gun, and the popsicle deep throater. Let me tell you, it's a sight to behold. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Shaddix. Jason, how are you, man?
Your professionality on these intros have gone out the window, haven't they?
It can be in question, can it?
Very much. But are you ready to start this
I'm
episode?
not even drinking today. I'm just drinking water.
Well, goddamn. Anyway, before we start the podcast, before we start talking about race news and sports news, I do want to take a moment to talk about something that's actually very important. Have you heard about Title IX?
Yes, it's essentially, it was the law that was passed that allowed girls to play guy sports and et cetera, et cetera.
In basic terms, yes, that's what
In
it's
very basic terms, yes.
Yeah, that's what it's been used for. But I wrote something about it. Title IX, a law passed 50 years ago on the 23rd of this month, is best represented by former Senator Birch Bayh. Quote, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participating in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal assistance, end quote. Now, this law affects pretty much everything in education from kindergarten through 12th grade to college and university. As it pertains to athletics, the classroom, sexual assault and violence on campus, employment, discrimination, admission, retaliation, and even financial assistance with tuition. So, it's more than just letting girls play same sports as guys.
It goes beyond athletics.
Yes, it goes beyond athletics, although a lot of people have pretty much only known it for its contribution to athletics. Now, while that is something that we should say, this is great, and it is, it has had a bit of a change in the last few years. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because in 2020, some of the rules regarding students who come forward with abuse allegation has changed. Now these students may now face an in-person hearing and cross-examination by a person chosen by the alleged attacker. In the nearly 2 years since the law has been changed.
What?
Yeah. Universities have reported a drop in abuse allegations, but not because there's been a drop in abuse cases, but because now the attackers have a chance to slander the people they assaulted, and that doesn't make it right. Imagine a young man or woman be sexually assaulted on campus. They already have a hard time trying to process this type of assault and to bring it into the light, but now the attackers are allowed to put somebody on the stand who will defend them and essentially make the person abused look like liars or attention seekers. If you think that's a bit far-fetched, I recommend remembering the Larry Nassar case where for nearly 2 decades he had been sexually assaulting hundreds of girls, many of them underage. He got away with it simply because people wouldn't believe these young girls or were pressured into staying quiet. Another example, and this one I want you to talk about, is not about sexual assault. It actually stems in sports, and it involves a guy, and it happened in our very own hometown. Would you please care to elaborate on that story?
I don't know a whole lot of details about the whole situation, but essentially, I'm not even gonna acknowledge the sport because it would be calling. He might be dead now that I think about it. The coach.
I'll say it. I don't really care.
It's a baseball coach.
Yeah, in a baseball.
No, he's not dead. I don't think so.
I don't really care.
Yeah. But we had heard that there was a guy that wanted to be the pitcher. Of course, he was African American, and that dude had an arm. But the coach did not want him to be a pitcher. And supposedly he had said to other coaches, I don't want a black boy pitcher. They put in this white guy pitcher, and he sucked. He absolutely sucked. But he was like a coach's son. Not that coach's son, but he was like, he's in the family somehow. So, yeah, that was essentially what happened. But the dude, the pitcher that was really good, he ended up just quitting and just leaving. And it sucked because he wanted to play. He had always wanted to play in the MLB. He played football too, but he wanted to be a baseball player. He didn't want to be a football player, but he's adapted to playing football now. So.
And this isn't the first time we've heard of cases happen like that in our very own hometown, is it?
Oh, no, that happens all the time.
Yeah, so, think about it. Title IX is very important, and right now it was rewritten by the previous administration in order to not have abuse come out. Why? Well, simply it's because, one, they don't care about the students, and two, it's because it hurts the reputation of these universities, these colleges, these high schools when that stuff comes out. But the Biden administration is looking into changing that and actually making it not only to get rid of that stupid rule of Title IX, but also to include complete protection with students who identify as a different sex but were born, man or female, but recognize that they are trans. And that's something that's been fought over in courts and all that. But they're thinking of, okay, right now with a case that happened in the Supreme Court a few years ago, it allowed them to have the ability to be able to change this and it be accepted because there's a precedent. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's very important, that we end this type of assaults. We end this type of looking down on the people who are assaulted, and because we want to believe, oh, this person didn't do it. There's no way that this person did it. We have to accept that this is something that happens all the time. And in our local college, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, southern Mississippi, there's a lot of cases of rape going on where they are attacked on campus, young girls. But a lot of them don't go to the authorities, and if they do go to the authorities, they go to the police on campus, and you know what the police on campus does, Davis?
Pretty much absolutely nothing.
Exactly, because one, Title IX protects the abusers, and two, colleges use this to their benefit because they don't want their perfectly little reputation to be ruined, but they don't want to fix the problem. I know I'm going on a tangent, but I just think it's very important just to talk about something like this, something that really helped a lot of athletes throughout the decades and something that will continue to help athletes. It's not perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it can be better and it should be better for everybody, not just us, but the people, the coming generation.
No, you're right. And it was a good idea here on the show to bring up Title IX because historically it has had a big importance to young kids all across the country. But like you said, it can be fixed and it needs to be worked on, and it needs to change to where it's not protecting the abusers. While we're on the topic of abusers, can we talk about Deshaun Watson?
We should just call this the Deshaun Watson podcast.
Yeah, the Deshaun. What's going on with Deshaun? What's Deshaun thinking about?
All right.
Okay.
Tell me how many more sexual assault lawsuits we got going on.
Well, there's not any more, but 20 of the 24 have been settled. The paperwork is in the progress of being settled right now, and there's not an exact cash estimate of how much money is going to be settled. So he settled all of them but 4.
So you're telling me that an innocent man, such as he said last week in the statement that you read, he's innocent, yet he settled at a court with 20 of these women, and I'm pretty sure 44 of those women said, no, go fuck yourself, we're going to take this all the way.
Essentially. The first girl that actually filed a lawsuit against her, Ashley Solis, I hope I'm saying that right, she was not one of the 20 women to settle. See, she was the first, and she's still going, and she's still pushing. She's one of the heroes in the story. Ashley, just don't give up, because, I want to see this dude Deshaun Watson behind bars, honestly. I know that's a bad thing to say, but...
You know, the sad part is that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, see, he was innocent. They dropped the lawsuit because they didn't have...
That is not what settling means.
No, if you settle, you're settling one because you can't afford to go to court. Too, you know you're guilty and you're trying to shush the person.
See, from right here, we could just directly transition to Vince McMahon and what's going on with him.
Do you want to transition to Vince McMahon and the world of professional wrestling and the WWE?
Let's not.
No, come on. We got to talk about.
No, well, yeah, well, I mean, I don't have notes for Vince McMahon and all that stuff, but, I mean, we could talk a little bit about it. So, his lawsuit and everything, or he gave a settlement of money to this woman that he essentially passed back and forth with between him and John Laurinaitis.
Who was the talent relationship executive, if I'm right.
John Laurinaitis?
Yeah, old 2-foot himself.
Yeah. So essentially what's going on is this woman was hired to be a what did they call it? A paralegal, right? I think so.
So she was hired to be a paralegal, and at the time she was making $100,000 a year. And then when she started a relationship with Vince McMahon, it is alleged, well, it's not alleged, he did this with company money. He gave her another $100,000, so she was making $200,000. And then it said that he passed her to John Laurinaitis, who John Laurinaitis has always had a reputation for being a bit of a sleazebag.
I mean, he would just go through swimsuit catalogs and pick out women that he wanted to sign to the WWE.
And not because they could wrestle.
No. And I mean, he married the Bella twins' mom.
You do know that...
Dude's sleazy.
You do know that when he's alleged to have been involved in in this abuse, well, not abuse scandal, but this inappropriate work sexual relationship with that woman, allegedly, he was married to Nikki Bella's mother, who was going through brain cancer at the time.
He's even more of a shitbag. What the heck?
But, well, anyway, going back into the story, like you said, she was passed to John Laurinaitis. And then she was giving hush money with it being around $3 million.
Given, not giving hush money, but she was given hush money.
Yeah, and she had to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and she was given $1 million up front, with the rest being given to her throughout the next 5 years, I believe. And even though it was with his money, they're going into okay, but you still gave her the $100,000 raise because she was sleeping with her at the time, and that's what they're investigating. And then they're going into other claims that this is not the first time this has happened. Now, bear in mind, this is a 78-year-old man, 76 at the time, and we're talking about a woman who was in her, 40s?
I think it was like 30s or 40s. I think so.
Either way, she was the age of his daughter.
Stephanie was like 50.
I think she is. But yeah, so they're looking into those allegations, the board of directors. He actually had to step down and resign from being the chairman and CEO of WWE, and his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, has been named interim CEO and chairwoman.
But see, Vince has been on the past episode of SmackDown, and he was on last night's episode of Raw. So...
And Dave Meltzer...
He came out and said nothing, and then left.
That's true. And Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer website, I don't know what you call it.
Wrestling Observer newsletter.
Yeah, the Wrestling Observer newsletter came out and said that before he left, Bruce Pritchard was named some kind, I think, executive of talent relationships. Great. The same job Johnny Ace had. And Dave Meltzer is saying, and he usually is right in these kind of reports, that it's a dead giveaway that Vince is still in power. Stephanie's just a figurehead, and he's still running everything behind the scenes.
He's really trying to get around this, isn't he?
It's his company. Then again, he's the one that went public with the company, so, this is something. Although, I wonder what it must be like for Stephanie.
Well, I'm wondering I'm looking up right now. I'm trying to see how long Vince and Linda have been separated.
We don't know, but the rumor is a few years.
A few years?
A few years.
Yeah. So then maybe that would give you a better idea of how long this might have been happening. Maybe.
And that's our bit of wrestling news. We don't really like talking about this, but that's it.
Yeah, we're wrestling fans, but we're not modern wrestling fans. So usually critiquing wrestling, it will be somebody else's job, who shall remain nameless.
Well, once they give us actual sports presentation like they promised, we might actually cover wrestling, but in the meantime, we'll cover the real sports.
Exactly. So, This is an awkward transition because it doesn't fit at all. Do you want to move on to talking about the NFL?
Before we move on to the NFL,
We got more things?
the NBA final game.
Oh, I don't care. Move on.
Just say who won. Just say who won.
The Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, this is their 4th title in 8 years. All right, moving on.
Klay Thompson lost his hat, and then he lost his ring in the street. He lost his championship ring somewhere in the street. He looked around for a second, tried to find it, and then he was like, oh, well, can't find it.
I bet there's some woman who knows where he put that ring up. Allegedly.
Allegedly. Nothing is confirmed. The Golden State Warriors won the finals.
Yeah.
Big deal.
All right, NFL news. Let's go.
So, we're going to be talking about week 1. We're going to be kind of previewing week 1 of the NFL season.
Dun, dun, dun.
The first game we're going to start off with, the first game of the season, is a Thursday night game on NBC. The Buffalo Bills versus the Los Angeles Rams.
Ooh.
That'll be a good one.
That's a good one right
That's
there.
one we're going to have to watch.
Now,
I think that could be a Super Bowl preview.
that is true because the Bills were doing amazing until they were screwed over in overtime.
Right. The past 2 years, they've been fucked over by the Chiefs in the playoffs.
Davis, how many times have I told you? Queefs. Keep it right.
Queefs.
Nah, I'm kidding. It's just the Chiefs. Just a... Well, I'm kidding. He's not.
So then on Fox on Sunday, the first Sunday of the season, is the Saints versus the Falcons. Sunday after that, we have the Browns versus the Panthers. Then you have 49ers versus the Bears. The Steelers versus the Bengals. Eagles versus your Detroit Lions.
Let's go, Lions!
I don't know. The Eagles have got a pretty good... They look like they're going to be a good team, but...
It's the Lions or not. Don't put money on it.
The Colts versus the Texans. Patriots versus the Dolphins. That'll be a little bit of an interesting one to see how Tua and Tyreek Hill mix together.
Plus to see if Coach Belichick has a new unstoppable team.
Might be too early to say that.
That's why I said to see.
We'll have to check and see. Ravens versus the Jets. I think that'll be a good showcase to see if the Ravens are going to be back to them old selves.
Well, I mean, Lamar Jackson is coming off from a knee injury?
I thought it was an ACL or something like that.
I can't remember, but either way, it's going to be interesting to see if he can, like you said, if he can play like his old self.
Right, I'm hoping he can.
Because if we see that he's struggling or that he's obviously still not 100%, you can essentially just write it off for the rest of the Ravens off the rest of the season because an injury like that is going to take a while to recover from.
Well, and the Ravens are wanting to build more around a running offense. That's why they traded away Hollywood Brown.
That's true.
So, I'm wondering, is that more Lamar Jackson running? But can you let him run after the injury? Will he be as fast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Would you risk it? Because after you get an injury, you tend to be injury prone.
Yeah, technically, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't risk it.
Exactly. At least not very early in the season.
No, yeah.
Anyway, what other games do we have?
We got the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Washington Commanders. We got the New York Giants versus the Titans. I think that'll be a good gauge to see how good the Titans will be. The Chiefs versus the Cardinals. The Chiefs versus the Cardinals. So, let's talk for a minute about this game. Do you think that that's going to be a good game? Do you think we're going to be looking at a playoff contender Cardinals, or do you think that that team is not what it used to be, or are we going to see?
We saw them be really good and pretty much go undefeated for a while during last season, right?
Yes.
All right. And then they just dropped off. They did our Raiders. They were going, yeah, ooh.
Yeah, it was a big crash and burn.
So this will determine whether they'll be able to start that engine back up and start moving forward up that hill, or if they're going to keep on going down.
If they can compete with the Chiefs, then I think that'll be a good indicator of where they're at.
Are we going to watch that game?
You can watch it. I don't care. I'm going to get NFL Red Zone. I'm just going to watch all of them at once, probably, is what I'm going to do.
Don't want to watch Juju do his TikTok dance?
I can't watch it. The Packers versus the Vikings.
Another interesting game because Devontae Adams is gone. That's a key player for
to see how the Packers will adapt without him.
How Aaron Rodgers will adapt to it. So, it's going to be very interesting. This could make or break them for the season, if we're honest.
In this game, this is probably the game that I'm most excited about. The Las Vegas Raiders will be taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. 325.
I got my money on Los Angeles.
You do?
They're angry.
They are. Well, it's basically because I love this decision for this to be the first game of the season for the Raiders and the Chargers, because it's essentially just picking up right where they left off last season.
What if it's a repeat of that last game?
If it was like that, ooh, it's just going to be another year of just game after game after game just being entertaining for the Raiders.
It definitely is not going to be a game to pinpoint whether the Raiders are doing good or the Chargers are doing good, just because both those teams are really great. There's no denying that. Last year, the Chargers were doing amazing. The Raiders won by the skin of their teeth. You can agree to that, right?
The bare skin of our teeth, yeah.
Exactly. So whether one team or loses, I don't think we can actually determine whether they're good or bad, just because that's just too much of two great teams going at it, two teams that have been stacking up their rosters, more the Raiders. Now, if the Raiders completely decimate the Chargers, though, then we can say, well, either the Chargers are going to suck really bad this year, or the Raiders have figured out the golden formula.
I feel like this game right here is going to be a big deciding factor of who is the best team in the AFC West.
You believe so?
I think it is. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be nearly as good as they have been for the past several years. And we'll get to the Broncos and the Seahawks in a minute. They play Monday night, but I'm not sure how well Russell Wilson's going to mesh with the Broncos. It might be a great fit. It might fit like a glove. But to me, when I'm looking at the AFC West, unbiased, I know I'm looking at myself. I'm looking at the Raiders and thinking, okay, they're best team in the AFC West. But when I look at it, those are the two teams that have really gone all in, not just getting one great player, but stacking up all of these really good players and building their each individual super teams. Their offenses, both of these offenses are stellar, but it's that Chargers defense that scares me. So,
and not to mention, the Raiders' biggest Achilles heels at the moment is Derek Carr. Will Carr now, with his old college teammate, be able to not choke during the middle of the games and be able to perform at the standard that he was hired to since the beginning and re-signed to play as?
I really hope he can. I'm hoping it gives new life to him with Devontae Adams being there. So yeah, I'm interested to see. I'm not going to call a prediction on what's going on there.
I'm going to go for Chargers beating the Raiders, but I'm going to say it's going to end up being a field goal.
You think it's going to be another dramatic game like it was the last game of the season last year?
I don't think we're going to go into overtime, but I definitely do think there's going to be a lot of penalties given for either side.
See, that's a bold statement. I could see that, though.
Bold statement, but you could see it, though.
Yeah, well, we're playing the game in Los Angeles, which, for the Raiders, technically a home game. Unless we're playing against the Rams. But, I mean, I guarantee you go there, you're going to see a lot more black than you are blue or yellow.
True. Like we've been saying, off microphone and, on microphone, this is going to be a very interesting season for that whole division. It's definitely something everybody needs to check out at least every now and then.
Each team in that division, and now that we can have 8 teams in the playoffs, realistically, ideally, all 4 teams from that division could make it.
Which is scary if you think about it. It's odd.
Because all of those teams look like they could be 10-win plus teams.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of who gets that number 1 spot.
But I'm honestly, I'm very excited. I can't wait to watch that. It's going to suck because we're going to have to do a double feature with the race, but I'm definitely looking forward to that game. That's my most anticipated game so far.
That's just going to be an exciting episode altogether when we record it.
Yep.
Sunday night football that night, we have the Buccaneers versus the Cowboys.
That's easy, Buccaneers.
You think Buccaneers?
Tom Brady. I'm telling you, Tom Brady's going to try to go for that elusive 8th world title.
Oh, no, I have no doubt he's going to. I think it'll be a really good indicator of, does he still have it? Game, it's like a warm-up game.
People have been saying that for the last decade, if he still has it.
At some point, you have to lose it.
The way it's going, I don't...
Unless you're Tom Brady.
Yeah, the way it's going, I don't think Tom's going to ever lose it.
And then Monday Night Football later that week, that next night, will be the Broncos versus the Seahawks. That will be a good indicator of if Russell Wilson is a good fit for the Broncos. He's playing against his old team in his old stadium, so it'll be fun to watch. I'm definitely going to check that one out.
Also, it'll be interesting to see if the rebuilding phase of the Seahawks has paid off.
No. No, I don't think it has, because as of right now, I think the only quarterback they have is Drew Lock.
Yeah. Well, like,
kind of screwed.
But you also think about this. If it doesn't work with Russell Wilson,
who else could it work with?
That's true. But is that all the NFL news we have this week?
That's all I'll talk about for right now. I'll leave all of the less juicier details out of it. I'm just refreshing to make sure no breaking news has popped up. It doesn't look like it has, so if you would like to move on to Formula One, the race that took place in Montreal, then by all means, let's do so.
All right, let's get this second part ready. And this time you're here with me. Yay!
Yeah, I'm not in the shitter now. Hold on 1 second. I feel something coming.
No! I was drowning last week. Honestly, it was just taking me forever to fucking do it because I wanted to do it in one take. All right, so I got some news. I don't know if it's very important, but I think it's very interesting. In soccer, or football like the rest of the world calls it, Poland has kicked out Maciej Rybus from not only the World Cup team, but also from the Nations League game in September. This comes after the Polish player signed a 2-year deal with a Russian football club. Previously, he had played for Poland 66 times and had been on the 2018 World Cup team.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of countries, a lot of sports teams, they don't want anything to do with players associated with Russia or players from Russia. In Formula One, we saw it this year with Nikita Mazepin getting the boot because his dad is a big player in the Russian government.
And they also dropped the Russian Grand Prix altogether.
Yes. Well, obviously, that was more for protection.
It's interesting to see everybody just like not wanting anything to do with Russia. I think that's, I mean, it's understandable. It's a little bizarre, you know?
I feel kind of bad for some people, though, because some of them are genuine people who, they don't have anything to do with the Russian policies. And some of them are, have gone in games. Like, I remember this tennis player who wrote "End the War" or "Peace" or "Love Ukraine," something like that. He was a Russian tennis player.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to remember, I mean, we're not going to get into all the politics of what went on in Ukraine and all that stuff, but a lot of the Russian people didn't want that war.
Yeah, and it's affecting
the vast majority of it.
Yeah, and like I said, we're not talking about the politics, but we are saying that it is affecting a lot of people who, let's be honest, a lot of Russian people, they just want to watch some sports. They don't care.
They just want to hang out. They just want to chill.
Exactly.
Do Russian things.
Exactly. So I thought that was something that was noteworthy. Besides that, I don't really have anything else. I didn't run and watch NASCAR this week just because.
It's NASCAR. It's the NBA of racing.
But let's start with the Formula One review. Are you ready?
Ready as I will be.
Have you seen the highlights?
Not really. My biggest gripe about this race was Mick Schumacher falling behind.
No, we will not talk about that.
We
will not talk about that. How Mick Schumacher was screwed over by that fucking Ferrari engine, okay? Capiche?
But it is, I mean, we have to talk about that. It was one of the bigger stories in the race.
Well, let me at least get to it.
Get to it. Go ahead.
We'll get to it. I don't really want to talk about it.
Get it over with.
All right, so let's start by talking about some news that was going on before the Grand Prix, with one of them being that Mercedes said they went too far with their setup in Baku. If you've seen the highlights or the video that's been going around, Lewis Hamilton trying to get out of the car. Oh, I could just feel his pain. He was just slow. He needed help. I've gone through back pain myself, like really bad back pain. I couldn't get up for like about 2 weeks. I sympathize with him. I don't like Princess Lulu, but you know what? I sympathize with him. And it turns out it was because of a different floor and a different, harsher setup. So this time, Mercedes said that they would not go any further in sacrificing their driver's health for the sake of performance. So at least that's one good thing. Now, something else that came out was that Yuki Tsunoda will start from the back of the grid after he went over his power unit limit, specifically with the internal combustion engine, the turbocharger, the MGU-H, and the MGU-K. Now, later on, it turns out that Charles Leclerc took a 10 grid penalty for exceeding the set limit of his turbocharger, which, he was on his third one in Baku and he had to change it out, and now he's on his fourth one. And that was before the weekend began. But then after free practice 2, Ferrari changed the electronic control unit, forcing him to be completely at the back of the grid. And he's also on his last penalty-free engine, MGU-H and MGU-K. So now, if those parts wear out, he's going to get a penalty. There's no more spare parts. And the engine from Baku, they said, was completely destroyed. It's unfixable. And they used parts from the engine in Spain, and that's why they think it fucked up the new parts in Baku.
See, and it's interesting because you remember how early in the season how that Ferrari car was doing.
It was doing amazing, but at the same time, you can't really...
We thought he was going to run away with the world title.
Yeah, especially after, 2 races in a row? Or was it the first 3?
Yeah, it was like 2 or 3.
First 2 or 3 races, Red Bull was just having DNFs after DNFs. Something was going wrong. They were worried about it, but now the tables have turned somewhat.
But to watch the downfall of all of that, and Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, and, it's just... Is it unreliable? Is that the problem that they've run into?
Yes, that's the problem. I know you didn't listen to last week's my part of the podcast.
I can't listen to our podcast.
Yes, you can't listen to it, but I did talk about that. It turns out that I was listening to Sam Collins, who's the F1. He's essentially the guy that knows everything about the parts, about the car, and he works for F1 as kind of like their TV presenter and all.
He's the aficionado.
Exactly. And he was talking about how if the FIA finds that, Ferrari and other teams are going through their engines too quickly, even though the engines are technically frozen until 2026, they will allow the manufacturing teams, to not rebuild a new engine, but to improve the current engines in order to have reliability. Of course, with reliability comes performance, but they're going to make sure that it's specifically, we're going to change this so this is a little bit faster, but it compromises reliability. No. You have to make it so that you're reliable. That's the only way you can make these engines, you can modify these engines. So we may be seeing that towards the end of the year and maybe next year, where teams like Red Bull, well, I'm not sure much about Red Bull, but Ferrari, Renault, and I think Mercedes may have to modify their engines to be more reliable.
What about Haas?
They are running on a Ferrari engine, as is Alfa Romeo.
Okay, I got you.
But we also have news about Haas. No, it's not the Mick thing.
I'll keep Mick out of this.
Well, we actually can talk about a little bit about Mick, because we know when the next upgrade is going to come for the first real big upgrade for the Haas cars. And
how many races into the season are we?
I think this is our 8th one with the Montreal Grand Prix.
And they're just now making a big upgrade to it?
Yep. So the big upgrade is not going to come in until, I believe, the July 31st, which should be the Hungarian Grand Prix, and the last race before summer break. After that, Haas has stated that they're thinking of maybe not even upgrading the car anymore and just focus on building next year's car.
So just giving up on this year and just moving on.
Exactly. And the issue I have with that is, one, look, you're not bringing in any upgrades to these races. I know it's expensive, and I know, Mick hasn't been making it really easy with the budget, but the issue is there are problems with this car that you guys have to fix. I know you can't fix the engine because that's a Ferrari thing, but obviously you can tell by the way the two guys are struggling to keep up with the rest of the pack that there needs to be something made. You made a really strong car at the beginning of the year, but every team, the moment they went from Spain to Bahrain for testing, because we had 2 testings, teams brought in upgrades immediately for Bahrain, and then for the Bahrain Grand Prix we saw upgrades. Haas didn't do anything.
They just left it like it is.
Exactly.
Do you think that's because they're spending too much money trying to fix Mick Schumacher's cars?
No, I think they're trying to run this like they think they built a car that's so good that they don't really need to upgrade it just every now and then, but that's not the case.
No, I mean, every car needs to be upgraded, and this car has had, the longer we get into the season, this car's had just about every problem you can have in a Formula One car.
Exactly. And sometimes upgrades aren't to make the car faster or more reliable, but upgrades are drivers' feedback, which they're like, okay, look, this car is doing this too much. Can you do something about it so it doesn't move to the left too much? Okay, we'll do that. Or can I get a car or get more downforce? That's what they do because it benefits the driver. They're not doing that. So how can they compete against cars who are being upgraded constantly and are being changed and are being faster, being lighter, being more agile than they are when they're stuck with the same car and the same problems? I believe this is one reason why Mick is struggling, because he's probably telling the team, I need this and this. And they're like, we'll get to
But they just won't do it, yeah.
Exactly.
And they're going to make Mick look bad, and then they're going to be like, well, we're firing you because you're not good. But you didn't provide him with what he needed.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, Kevin Magnussen is doing really good. He is, but at the same time, if you see...
He's doing good, but I don't know. To me, every time I've seen a Formula One race or the highlights, he's always been like right down there at the bottom.
They're going through a lot of bad luck. I don't know how many ladders they walked under, how many mirrors they broke, but yeah, they've been going through a lot of bad luck. And the problem...
How many crickets they killed.
Exactly. But the problem is, like I said, if you can't help them make the car better to suit their driving styles, how can you expect them to fight the bigger teams? But anyway, that's what's going on with them. Now, I also have some stuff regarding porpoising. So, the FIA announced a new technical directive to help teams struggling with excessive bouncing, with 2 immediate solutions added for this weekend and a study to help the FIA determine how to proceed with this in the long haul. The immediate solutions were that the teams were allowed to add one more stay. Essentially, it's a wire that's connected to the car and the floor. And that's how they keep the floor from completely going and hitting the ground.
Right.
So now, normally in an F1 car, there's only one stay, at least with the modern regulations. So they added an additional one that you can add towards the front. And also for the floor to be a bit thicker. Now, Mercedes was the only team to add that additional stay to the floor of their car. Alpine's team principal, Otmar, complained how it essentially would be unfair that Mercedes had this additional stay when other teams didn't, granting them an unfair advantage during qualifying in the race. Furthermore, Otmar stated that, quote, as far as the process goes, it's a technical directive, and technical directives, as we all know, are not regulations, end quote. Therefore, if Mercedes ran the stay, the other teams had ground to protest the results. Mercedes took this additional stay off on the grounds that it didn't meet their expectation in performance, but then went on to say that in Silverstone they will be pushing for a regulation change to add the stay. Another thing the FIA wants to try to use is the data gathered from the cars to determine the number of bounces based on all the different setups the teams try out during the sessions. And during qualifying, they'll be given one, which the FIA will determine is the safest one. They're like, okay, you can choose out of all these, but in the case that it doesn't meet the requirements, then the teams will be given a penalty by raising the ride height of the car by 10 millimeters. This, the FIA is hoping, may stop the teams from pushing performance over the driver's health, but only time will tell. Essentially, because I'm just trying to summarize this, essentially, if you're going to try different setups, if all these setups are causing more excessive bouncing, then you're going to have to raise the ride height of the car mandatory by 10 millimeters. And it might not seem like much, but it's definitely going to affect the car, and they're going to be slow if it's a high-speed, low-downforce track. So
Mercedes was the team that has suffered with the porpoising the most, right?
that is true.
You can't be mad at.
But how come they're the only team that brought the additional stay, and how come they said we took it off because there wasn't enough performance, and then said, well, next race at Silverstone, we're going to push for the regulation to stay?
Yeah, that's a little bit confusing. I'm not sure how that makes sense.
It's Mercedes. They're trying to find something. But anyway, let's go on to free practice and qualifier. So during free practice, we actually saw a groundhog run into the track and almost get hit by a Ferrari.
Why?
It happens sometimes. Mercedes tried a different setup for Lewis Hamilton's cars during Friday free practice that Lewis said was undrivable. So for the race and qualifying, Lewis Hamilton wasn't actually on a setup for himself. Instead, he was using the setup that George Russell used. And I think he did pretty well.
Yeah, he finished P3.
Yep. More issues for Alfa Romeo with Valtteri Bottas, who couldn't compete in FP2 due to a technical problem with the car. Again, it's an engine problem. Ferrari engine.
Imagine that. Something we haven't seen before.
On Saturday, the weather threw the teams a curveball in FP3 in qualifying as it was pouring throughout the day. Drivers struggled throughout FP3 as they tried to find the setup that would work for qualifying as they slid all over the track. Sebastian Vettel complained about the car after experiencing a lack of grip in Q1 qualifying and first qualifying compared to free practice 3. In Q2, Alex Albon locked up his tires and just tapped the wall. He kept the car running and was able to pull it out. There was just a yellow flag, but about a minute later, Sergio Perez hit the barrier, causing a red flag and forcing him to start P15.
No, Checo.
No! Anyway, an impressive feat, and this is impressive, was seeing both Haas drivers make it not only into Q3 but landing a P5 and P6 start for the race. But Fernando Alonso, he's the star of qualifying as he was sandwiched in second place between pole sitter Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. That was free practice and qualifying. Thoughts, my boy?
Well, and when was the last time that two Haas cars had been both in the
2018.
2018 when they were both in the top 10?
Yep.
Okay.
And then one of the cars proceeded not to work and ended up being beaten.
Kind of like what happened here.
Yep, but worse. Because I think
much worse.
I think Kevin Magnussen was able to finish the race the last time in P6.
Did either one of them finish the race?
Yes, but at this point, really.
Very low. As well, just not had finished.
Exactly. Now, let's start the race. Oh, boy. It was a dry day. And, yeah, it was just dry. It didn't rain, so.
Well, that's good.
Yes. The race starts, and Max pulls off from everybody else. Schumi loses 2 places in the first lap alone.
What?
Yep. He was struggling. Kevin Magnussen suffered front wing damage, specifically the right end plate, from tapping Lewis Hamilton's car, and you just cannot keep those two apart.
No, you can't.
Same thing that happened in Spain. And behind him was Esteban Ocon, who was complaining over the radio to the team that it was dangerous because the end plate was supposedly falling off and it could hit somebody. That wasn't the case. And Kevin was given a black and orange flag. After the race, Kevin criticized the race directors and stewards for being too easily influenced, as in the previous years they've been able to race with damaged wings, most notably last year in Jeddah after Lewis Hamilton hit the back of Max Verstappen's car.
How bad was it actually?
It wasn't that bad. It would have stayed on.
You could have kept going.
Yeah, you could have kept going. And honestly, once they went for the pit stops, they could have just changed the wing out, or they could have just ripped the piece off and be like, okay, there you go. But it wasn't in danger of falling.
Like Aston Martin when they did the duct tape.
Yeah. And even then, you didn't need the duct tape, and it was AlphaTauri.
It was AlphaTauri.
Yeah, but they just don't open DRS. And that could have been it. But the new stewards aren't really that great, and they're easily too influenced by other teams. Anyway, but this ruined Kevin Magnussen's race again, and he couldn't push that car further up the grid, and he ended up being, I think, P17, P16. Second, either last or second to last.
Come on, Maggie.
All right, it wasn't until on the last corner, going into lap 4, that Carlos Sainz was able to pass Fernando Alonso and began the hunt for Max Verstappen. On lap 8, Checo Perez suffered a gearbox issue and was forced to retire. This enabled a virtual safety car and Max pits, but Carlos Sainz stays out. Many drivers were suffering from graining, and even pitting early on didn't make much of a difference. For a few laps, Mick Schumacher and Zhou Guanyu were having a great fight, but going into turn 9, Mick's car lost power and came to a rolling stop. Once again, another Ferrari engine has a problem and forced to retire.
Another Haas car.
Another virtual safety car comes out, giving Sainz a cheap pit stop, putting him behind Fernando Alonso.
Is there something really wrong with that car, though?
No, the engine just shut off going into the corner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he
can turn it back on? Turn the keys, Mick.
Nope, it's the engine.
Golly.
Anyway.
Is that just a worn-out engine, or?
The reliability issue.
Right.
Yeah. By lap 28, Leclerc was P7 and stayed there for 19 laps, as Esteban Ocon defended against him brilliantly, but a slow pit stop, leaving Leclerc P12, so he lost almost half. Lap 44 saw Verstappen come in for a pit stop and came out side by side with Lewis Hamilton. The 7-time world...
Oh, man.
Yeah, the 7-time world champion didn't make it easy for his former rival as he forced him to slow down into the end of the lap, where Max passed the Mercedes with ease with his superior straight line speed. Yeah, he didn't make it easy for him.
No, yeah.
After pitting on lap 49, Yuki Tsunoda came out of the pit lane and couldn't stop the car fast enough to rejoin the track, and he hit the barricade. This made the safety car come out and Sainz pits, and he comes out right behind Max Verstappen. For the next 15 laps after the safety car came in, Verstappen defended from Carlos without being able to talk to the team as his radio stopped working at the end of the safety car lap. He could hear the team but couldn't talk to them, and yet he defended brilliantly. That Red Bull's top speed in the straights really helped him save his ass from Carlos Sainz, who had DRS.
This is a track that had a lot of straights on it?
You had one main straight, but
Okay.
for Red Bull has been fixing that issue that they've been having against the Ferraris. But anyway, Fernando Alonso began losing pace due to an air leak in his car. So he ended up being, I think, P9. And Max Verstappen took the lead of the race, kept the lead, and won the race. Carlos Sainz in P2, Hamilton P3, Russell P4, and Leclerc P5.
George Russell, he's Mr. Not Mr. Consent. I mean, I hope he gets consent. He's Mr. Consistent. He's consistently been in the top 5, top 10 every single race this year.
Yep,
And I love it.
He's never finished lower than P5. So that is the Montreal Grand Prix, the Canadian Grand Prix. It wasn't really that much exciting. That's why I kind of sped through it. There really wasn't a lot.
I mean, Leclerc was at the bottom.
Yeah.
Checo fell down.
Checo fell down. Carlos, let's be honest, he's not a threat to Max Verstappen. He wasn't. We saw that throughout the 15 laps because Charles Leclerc would have made a better attempt at trying to overtake Max.
Yeah. If this was Charles Leclerc and Max, it would have been a much better race.
Exactly, but it wasn't.
Imagine that you have Leclerc, Verstappen, and Lewis Hamilton, top 3 racers in that race.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been good.
And again, Haas, Mick Schumacher, he's cursed. That boy cannot get a point. But anyway, that was the Montreal Grand Prix. We hope you enjoyed this episode and sign us off, white boy.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and peace.
Second and goal just outside the 10. Hart dips it in and it's Ward. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offense taking